What happens when a father stands in front of a life or death decision, and the first thing he asks about isn't hope, but the price tag? When the man who once promised to protect his daughter signs a paper that lets her die, not because she couldn't be saved, but because saving her would cost too much. People love to say family comes first, but what if money comes first instead? When the truth finally comes to light, should silence protect a father's reputation? Or should justice speak, even if it leaves him with nothing in 24 hours? Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see where our stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next twist in this journey. Now, let's listen to her from the heart. I was lying in the ICU unconscious. A ventilator tube filled my throat. Machines kept time for my heart-steady mechanical beeps doing the work my body couldn't. I didn't hear what happened that night. I didn't see the look on my father's face. But later, when I read the report, when I spoke to the people who were there, I learned every word. He asked the surgeon one question. How much is this going to cost? Not is she going to make it. Not is she in pain. Not can you save her. Just the number. The surgeon explained that the first operation had stabilized the bleeding, but there was more swelling in my brain than expected. They needed a second procedure, a specialist. More time in the OR. Insurance would cover part of it, but there would be a substantial out-of-pocket balance. My father listened, and then he said clear and steady, "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery." He signed the do not resuscitate order at 11:18 p.m. His hand didn't shake. He didn't ask to see me. He didn't walk past the glass of my room. He didn't say goodbye. I learned all of that 3 weeks later, when I woke up. But the truth is, nothing about that sentence surprised me. I was 4 years old when they opened my chest the first time. A congenital heart defect, an 11-hour surgery, a scar that runs pale and straight down the center of me. The cardiologist called it a success. My father called it a bill, $214,000. That number lived in our kitchen like a permanent guest. I was 8 the first time he threw it at me. I'd asked for new sneakers because mine had split along the sole and rainwater seeped in every time I walked to school. He didn't even look up from the stack of envelopes. "Do you know how much you cost this family?" By 12, I stopped asking for things. By 15, I was babysitting 3 houses on our block to buy my own school supplies. By 18, I signed my student loan documents alone at the dining room table, while my older sister Blaine packed for a university my parents were paying for in full. She got a car at 16. I rode the bus. She got tuition checks. I got interest rates. She got birthday dinners at restaurants downtown. I got a boxed cake and a card signed in my mother's handwriting. And here's the part that's hardest to explain. I wasn't angry. I believed him. I believed I had cost us something we could never fully recover from. I carried that belief the way I carried my hospital badge, quietly, automatically, without question. The only person who never treated me like a debt was my grandmother, Maris Vale. Her house in Ardsley Park smelled like rosemary and old wood. There was a porch swing that creaked with every shift of weight and a narrow garden she kept alive through Georgia summers that could melt asphalt. Every Saturday after I finished a week of 12-hour shifts and night rotations, I drove out there, 40 minutes each way. I brought groceries, checked her blood pressure, sat beside her while she told stories that wandered but never lost their warmth. She never once said I owed anyone anything. She said things like, "Did you eat today and you look tired, baby?" Near the end, her hands thinner than I remembered, she squeezed mine and said something I didn't understand at the time. "When it's time, Elliot Sutter will find you." I smiled and told her not to worry. I thought it was the medication talking. I was wrong. 3 weeks after the accident, I opened my eyes to hospital light, flat, white, unforgiving. My throat burned from the ventilator that had been removed. My ribs felt like someone had wedged iron rods between them. Every breath hurt. The first face I saw was not my father's. It was Roxanne Hale's. Roxy had been head nurse in our ICU for nearly 3 decades. Gravel in her voice, steel in her spine. She stood by the monitor with her arms folded, watching my vitals like she always did. When she saw my eyes move, she didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She pulled a chair closer and sat down. "You're safe," she said. I tried to speak. It came out like broken glass. How long? 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I closed my eyes again, not because I was tired, but because something inside me was lining up. Something old. When my father came in later that afternoon, he performed the role perfectly. He rushed to my bedside. He grabbed my hand. His voice cracked in all the right places. We were so scared. I looked at him. I've read thousands of faces in ICU rooms, families waiting for news, hope hanging by a thread. I know what fear of loss looks like. This wasn't it. This was fear of exposure. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I didn't even ask. I just remembered. And I started calculating. The accident happened at 4:17 a.m. I remember that because I glanced at the dashboard clock while doing the math in my head. If I skipped breakfast, I could get 6 hours of sleep before my next shift. If I showered first, maybe 5. The rain was light. The intersection near Abercorn Street was almost empty. The pickup truck ran the red light at full speed. The impact crushed the driver's side like it was made of cardboard. I don't remember the sound. I remember the sensation of my body being thrown sideways and the taste of copper in my mouth. I was conscious for maybe 90 seconds, long enough to tell the paramedic my name. Then nothing. At Coastal Savannah Medical Center, the hospital where I worked, they rushed me into surgery within the hour. Internal bleeding, brain swelling, 4 broken ribs. The first procedure bought time. The second one would decide everything. They called my emergency contact, my father. He arrived just before 11 that night. He did not ask to see me first. He went to billing. Roxy told me later she watched it happen from the nurse's station. She said he walked with purpose, not panic. How much he asked. The surgeon explained the estimate. My father nodded. She doesn't have a healthcare proxy, he said. I'm her father. I make the decision. That was a lie. 3 years earlier, when I filled out my employee onboarding packet, I had named June Park as my healthcare proxy. June and I had survived nursing school together. We'd held hands through anatomy labs and night shifts and breakups. I trusted her with my life. It was right there in my employee file. My father knew that. He had seen that paperwork before. He chose not to mention it. Then he said the sentence, "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery." And he signed the DNR. Roxy told me she felt her hands go numb. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She opened my file. It took her less than 2 minutes to find June's name. She called her at 11:14 p.m. June picked up on the second ring. Roxy told her everything, car accident, coma, DNR just signed. June didn't ask for clarification. I'm on my way. It was pouring by then. 90 minutes on the highway in the dark. She arrived just before 1 a.m., breathless, shaking, ID in hand, a copy of the proxy she'd kept filed at home. She revoked the DNR. She authorized the surgery. The surgeon scrubbed in again. And Roxy did one more thing before her shift ended. She filed an internal incident report, time-stamped, documented, quoting my father's exact words. My father went home that night believing I would be dead by morning. He slept. The next day, when no call came, he didn't rush back to the hospital. He didn't demand updates. He didn't sit by my bed. Instead, he drove to a notary's office. While I was lying unconscious, he prepared a power of attorney with my forged signature. He traced it from old consent forms I'd signed at 18, back when I still believed his involvement was protection instead of control. He brought it to Dane Rourke, a notary who owed him favors. Dane stamped it. My father filed the paperwork to transfer my grandmother's house in Ardsley Park into his name. He didn't know that 5 months earlier, my grandmother had already transferred it to me through a private attorney, Elliot Sutter. He thought the house was unclaimed. He thought I was about to die. Within 6 days, he had leveraged the property for nearly $300,000. That money did not go toward my hospital bill. It went somewhere else. When I woke up and Roxy told me everything, I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I asked one question. What time did he sign it? 11:18 p.m. I nodded. Then I asked for my phone. I scrolled past every missed call from my father, and I dialed a name I hadn't used before. Elliot Sutter. He answered on the second ring. "I've been trying to reach you for months," he said. And in that moment, I understood. The DNR was not the worst thing my father had done. It was just the first thing I survived. When I called Elliot Sutter from my hospital bed, I expected confusion. What I heard instead was calculation. "I've been trying to reach you for months," he said, his voice calm in the way attorneys learn to be when the facts are about to matter more than emotion. He explained that my grandmother, Maris Vale, had come to his office 2 years before she died. She had insisted on using an attorney my father did not know. She wanted her paperwork handled privately sealed and recorded through his firm alone. Her will was simple. The house in Ardsley Park belonged solely to me. A trust account with just over $80,000 belonged solely to me. No shared names, no contingencies, no family clauses, just me. The will had already gone through probate 5 months earlier. The court had validated it. The deed transfer had been recorded with the county. "It was finalized," Elliot said. "You have been the legal owner of that property for months." My hand tightened around the phone. "Is it still in my name?" There was a pause. Papers shuffling. "Let me check the current deed record. I'll call you back within the hour." 53 minutes later, my phone rang again. His tone had changed. "The property was transferred out of your name 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, the exact window of time I had been unconscious. To whom I asked, though I already knew, Gerald Vale, your father. He filed a power of attorney authorizing the transfer. I never signed a power of attorney. I'm aware," Elliot said evenly. "The original probate documents in my possession contain no such authorization. The POA filed with the county appears to have been executed during your hospitalization. It wasn't hard to imagine how." While I lay in the ICU ventilator breathing for me, my father had prepared the paperwork. He traced my signature from old medical forms I had signed at 18, back when I still believed he was protecting me. He took the document to Dane Rourke, a notary he had known for years, a man who did plumbing jobs on the side for extra cash and didn't ask questions when favors were called in. Dane stamped it. My father filed it. And because no one had reason to suspect fraud in the middle of a medical crisis, the transfer processed. He then recorded a mortgage against the property. 6 days later, Elliot continued, approximately $280,000. The number settled into the room like a physical object. "He leveraged the house," I said. "Yes." "For medical bills." There was another pause. "No, I didn't need more explanation than that. The money had vanished into places I already suspected existed quiet debts, hidden balances, obligations my father never admitted to at church or at dinner tables. Gambling, most likely, or business failures he masked with pride. The house had been collateral for a secret life. And here was the part that mattered most. He had done all of it believing I would not wake up. The DNR was not an emotional decision made in shock. It was part of a sequence. He asked about the cost of surgery. He refused it. He signed the order that would end my life. Then within hours, he set into motion a plan to take control of the one asset he thought I would never claim. He believed I would be dead by morning. I lay in that hospital bed and felt something unfamiliar settle inside me. Not rage, clarity. Later that afternoon, my father walked into my ICU room for the first time since the accident. The nurses logged it at 2:17 p.m. He paused in the doorway like he was stepping onto a stage. Then he crossed the room, quickly took my hand, and let tears form at exactly the right moment. "I never left your side," he said. I looked at him. I had spent years reading families at bedsides. I knew the difference between grief and performance. "I'm glad I'm alive," I said quietly. "So are we," he replied. We. He didn't know I had already spoken to Elliot. He didn't know I had learned about the forged power of attorney. He didn't know the house had never legally been his to touch. He thought he was still ahead of the story. That evening after he left, I asked Roxy to close the door. Tell me exactly what he said I told her. She didn't soften it. He said, "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. She's been a financial drain her whole life." I inhaled slowly, feeling the ache in my ribs. What time? 11:18 p.m. I nodded. I wrote it down. Then I asked for my phone again and called Elliot back. Send me copies of everything I said. The probate documents, the deed transfer, the mortgage filing. I will, he replied. What do you intend to do? I stared at the white hospital ceiling. He believed I wouldn't wake up, I said. I'm going to let him believe I don't know. Silence lingered on the line. I understand, Elliot said. I ended the call and placed the phone on my chest. The DNR had not been an isolated act. It had been the first move in a calculation, and I had no intention of responding with emotion. I was discharged from Coastal Savannah Medical Center on a clear Thursday morning, 10 o'clock. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and brewed coffee. My discharge papers were tucked neatly into a folder. My ribs still throbbed when I moved too quickly, but I could walk without assistance. My father arrived with a suitcase. He had already packed it. You're coming home with me, he said, not asking. It'll be easier to take care of you. The word easier hung between us. June stepped through the sliding doors a minute later, car keys in her hand. I'm staying with June, I said evenly. She has a spare room. For the first time, something tightened behind my father's eyes. Not anger. Calculation disrupted. You'd rather stay with a friend than your own family, he asked. She's been my emergency contact for 3 years, I replied. He didn't connect it yet. He gripped the handle of the suitcase harder, then released it. Fine, he said, if that's what you want. He left without another word. From the passenger seat of June's car, I watched him through the rearview mirror, standing alone with the luggage he had prepared for control. That afternoon, we spread everything across June's kitchen table. Daylight filtered through thin curtains. Elliot joined us by video call, his voice steady through the speaker. We built the timeline piece by piece. 11:18 p.m. My father signed the DNR. 12:51 a.m. June arrived and revoked it. The following morning, the forged power of attorney was notarized. 6 days later, the Ardsley Park house was mortgaged for $280,000. Elliot confirmed again that my grandmother's will had been probated months before. The property had never legally belonged to my father. He transferred an asset he did not own, Elliot said, using a fraudulent instrument, during a period when you were medically incapacitated. And after signing paperwork to let me die, I added. June reached across the table and squeezed my hand. This is bigger than just family drama, she said quietly. It was. Elliot drafted a notice of title dispute and forgery that afternoon and sent it directly to the bank holding the mortgage. Because the claim involved forged signatures and a contested inheritance, the response was swift. Within hours, the loan was frozen. No additional funds could be withdrawn, no refinancing, no transfers. The system moved faster than anger ever could. I didn't call my father. I didn't warn him. I let the paperwork speak. The next step was an emergency motion filed with the county court to void the deed transfer based on the fraudulent power of attorney. By late afternoon, the property was officially flagged as legally disputed. The title was no longer clean. The house which my father had believed secured his escape from debt was now untouchable. That evening, I drove with June to the police station. I walked inside, slowly, ribs reminding me of every movement. I filed a formal report for forgery and fraudulent notarization. I provided copies of the probate documents, the deed records, and the hospital's incident report, quoting my father's DNR statement, word for word. Dane Rourke's name went into the report. The matter shifted from civil dispute to potential criminal investigation. By the time we returned to June's apartment, the sky had gone dark. At 10:43 p.m., my phone rang. Dad. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. What did you do? He asked. His voice wasn't loud. It was tight. "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I just stopped covering for you." Silence filled the line. "You've frozen the bank," he said. "They're asking questions. That's between you and them. You'd ruin your own father." I felt nothing rise in my chest. "You signed a paper to let your daughter die," I said. "You ruined that relationship yourself." He inhaled sharply like he wanted to argue. No argument came. The line went dead. I set the phone down on the table. In less than 24 hours, his access to money had narrowed. His leverage had collapsed. His assumption that I would stay quiet had disappeared. I didn't shout. I didn't explain. I let the silence do what it had always done. Only this time, it wasn't protecting him. The next morning, the first official notice arrived from the bank. It was addressed to my father, but Elliot forwarded me a copy within minutes of receiving it. A formal request for explanation regarding a disputed title and potential fraudulent conveyance. The language was clinical, almost polite, but the implication was clear. The loan was under review. Funds were restricted pending investigation. By noon, another call came in, this time from my life insurance provider. I hadn't even thought about that policy in years. It was something I had set up when I first started working at Coastal Savannah Medical Center, a basic employee benefit with a modest payout. I had named June as my beneficiary back then. It felt natural. She was the person I trusted to make medical decisions for me. Of course, she would also handle anything else if something happened. The representative on the phone spoke carefully. "There's been a request to verify a beneficiary change made 3 years ago," she said. "We've flagged it for review due to a signature discrepancy." I felt the air shift in the room. What beneficiary change, I asked. 3 years ago, the beneficiary was updated from June Park to Gerald Vale, my father. The form had my signature on it. I didn't need to see it to know what Elliot would find. Within an hour, he confirmed it. The document had been submitted through the standard process. It appeared routine at first glance, but the signature, when compared to verified samples, didn't match my handwriting patterns. The slant was off, the pressure inconsistent, the loops too rigid. It wasn't mine. I sat back in June's kitchen chair and stared at the papers spread across the table. The DNR, the forged power of attorney, the mortgage, and now the life insurance policy. I had assumed at first that the house had been an act of opportunism, a man drowning in debt, grabbing whatever floated close enough. I was wrong. This wasn't reaction. It was preparation. My father hadn't only been ready for the possibility that I might live, he had prepared for the possibility that I might die. If the surgery had not been authorized, if June had not driven through the storm that night, if Roxy had not opened my file, my father would have been both the man who signed the order to let me go and the sole beneficiary of my policy. He would have controlled the house. He would have collected the insurance payout. He would have stood at my funeral and accepted condolences. The DNR was not an impulsive decision. The mortgage was not panic. The insurance form was not coincidence. It was a sequence, a pattern, and patterns are hard to argue away. Late that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen since I left the hospital. Blaine. I let it ring once before answering. "What did you do to Dad?" she asked without greeting. Her voice carried tension but not confusion. She already knew something had happened. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "The bank is asking questions. He says you froze his loan, that you're accusing him of fraud. I filed reports based on documents," I said. "That's all." There was a pause. "He's under a lot of stress," she continued. "You don't understand what kind of pressure he's been under." I inhaled slowly. "Did you know about the DNR silence?" It stretched long enough for me to hear her breathing shift on the other end. "Blaine." "I was in the waiting room," she said finally. My ribs tightened, not from injury. I heard him talking to the surgeon. She went on. "He said we couldn't afford another surgery. He said you'd already cost the family enough. And I didn't say anything." The words landed without volume. "Did you know he was signing it?" I asked. "Yes." "Did you try to stop him?" "No." Her voice broke slightly, but it didn't undo the answer. "And the house?" I asked. Another silence. "I knew he was transferring it," she admitted. "He said Grandma had left it to the family. He said it would help settle debts. Did you know it was in my name?" "No," she whispered. "I didn't know that. He promised you something, didn't he?" The line went quiet again. 85,000, she said finally. "He said if I stayed out of it and didn't question anything, he'd make sure I was taken care of. While I was in a coma." "Yes," she said, as if she could hear the thought forming in my head. I closed my eyes. "I was scared," she added. "He's always controlled everything." "I didn't think silence is a choice," I said. "I know. Not saying anything is still saying something." I know, she repeated softer now. For years, I had believed that Blaine was simply favored, that she floated through life on currents I never felt. Now I understood something else. She had been afraid of him too. That didn't excuse her, but it explained the shape of her loyalty. "I'm not cutting you out of my life," I said after a moment, "but I'm not protecting you anymore either." "I don't expect you to," she replied. When the call ended, I sat in the dim light of June's living room. The heating pad rested across my ribs. The television was off. The apartment quiet. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. Not for being born, not for surviving, not for defending myself. The old belief that I owed something for that childhood surgery had dissolved somewhere between the ICU and the police station. Boundaries aren't revenge. They're self-preservation. That night, Elliot called again. "The court has formally accepted the emergency motion," he said. "Your father has been served." I pictured the knock at his door, the envelope in his hands, the official seal. "He will likely try to repair his reputation," Elliot added carefully. "I know," I said, "and he'll choose a familiar audience." "Yes," I replied. "He always does." Oak River Community Church sat at the end of a tree-lined road just outside Savannah. White steeple, red brick, folding chairs arranged in neat rows inside a fellowship hall that smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner. My father had been a deacon there for 15 years. He fixed broken pipes for members without charging a dime. He organized fundraisers when the roof leaked. He read scripture in a voice steady enough to quiet a room. In their eyes, he was steady, sacrificial, dependable. On the first Sunday of every month, the congregation gathered after service for a community meeting. About 120 people, paper plates, standing microphone near the front. When I walked into the fellowship hall that morning, I stayed near the back wall. He was already at the microphone. As many of you know, he began voice warm and measured. "My daughter survived a terrible accident last month." Heads turned toward me, smiles, nods. A few claps. "The doctors weren't sure she'd make it," he continued. "But God had other plans. I prayed every night. I never left her bedside." Applause rippled through the room. I stood still. He had rewritten history in less than 3 minutes. "I saw a miracle," he said. I waited until the applause faded. Then I walked forward. "Dad," I said, just loud enough for the first rows to hear, "May I say something?" He hesitated only a fraction of a second. "Of course," he said, handing me the microphone. He couldn't refuse. Not in front of them. I faced the room. "Thank you for your prayers," I began. "I'm grateful to be alive. But I need to correct something." The air shifted. "My father did come to the hospital the night of my accident," I said. "He spoke to the surgeon. He asked how much the surgery would cost. I felt him stiffen beside me. When he was told the estimate, he said, and I'm quoting from the hospital's incident report, 'Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery.'" Silence swallowed the room. He signed a "Do Not Resuscitate" order at 11:18 p.m. A murmur spread through the back rows. "I'm alive because my healthcare proxy was on file, and my friend arrived to revoke that order. Not because my father stayed by my bedside." He stepped toward me. "Wendy, I'm not finished." I kept my voice steady. "While I was in a coma, a power of attorney was filed transferring my grandmother's house out of my name. That document was forged. A dish clattered somewhere near the tables. A mortgage for nearly $280,000 was taken out against that property. My father's face had drained of color, and 3 years ago, my life insurance beneficiary was changed from my friend to my father. That signature was also forged. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I stated facts. Elliot stepped forward, then holding a folder. "I am Elliot Sutter," he said calmly, attorney for Maris Vale's estate. The will naming Wendy as sole beneficiary was probated 5 months ago. The transfer executed during her hospitalization is under legal challenge due to fraudulent documentation. The bank has been notified. A man from the back row spoke up. If this is just a misunderstanding, he asked, "Why is there an attorney here?" No one answered. Pastor Reynolds cleared his throat. "Let's hear everything he said." My father's composure cracked. "I was under financial pressure," he said. "You don't know what I've been dealing with. Debts, responsibilities." He stopped himself before saying more. I looked at him. "You signed a paper to let me die," I said. "I signed papers to let the truth live." No one clapped. No one moved toward him. After a long moment, Pastor Reynolds spoke again. "Gerald," he said gently, "we need to ask you to step down from your position while this is resolved." My father looked around the room, searching for support. He found none. He set his hands on the folding table beside him as if steadying himself. Then he walked toward the exit. The door closed behind him without a sound. I placed the microphone back on its stand. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt visible. For the first time in that room, I wasn't the financial burden. I wasn't the quiet daughter in the back pew. I was simply a woman who refused to disappear. Monday morning, less than 24 hours after the meeting at Oak River Community Church, my phone rang at 8:12 a.m. It was Elliot. The bank has officially transferred the mortgage file to their fraud investigations unit, he said without preamble. The loan is fully frozen. All related accounts are restricted pending review. I stood by June's kitchen window watching sunlight stretch across the parking lot below. "What does that mean for him?" I asked. "It means he cannot access remaining funds. He cannot restructure the loan. And the bank is requesting a detailed accounting of how the disbursed amount was used." By noon, a second notification arrived, this time in writing from my insurance provider. The beneficiary change filed 3 years earlier was under formal investigation. The signature discrepancy had triggered a compliance review. The matter had been escalated. Dane Rourke, the notary, who had stamped the forged power of attorney, had retained his own attorney. Elliot told me Dane had begun cooperating with investigators almost immediately. "He's trying to mitigate his exposure," Elliot explained. "He's already acknowledged he did not personally witness you sign the document." That mattered. At 3:15 p.m., a process server knocked on my father's front door. One of his neighbors watched it happen while bringing in the mail. He was formally served. By the end of the afternoon, the consequences had begun spreading beyond paperwork. Because the Ardsley Park property was under active legal dispute, the bank revoked authorization to use any undisbursed funds from the mortgage. They demanded clarification on the allocation of the money already released. That triggered something else. Creditors. Short-term lenders my father had apparently been juggling for years began calling. Word travels quickly when collateral is flagged. Businesses that had extended him credit for plumbing supplies shifted their terms overnight. No more rolling balances. Payment due upon delivery. 3 contractors he regularly partnered with called demanding immediate settlement of outstanding invoices. Within a day, his cash flow tightened to a standstill. He had built his business on reputation and informal trust. Now both were eroding at the same time. I didn't need to declare anything. The system did it for me. On Tuesday, Elliot requested preliminary financial disclosures tied to the mortgage proceeds. Through banking summaries and transaction records, a clearer picture emerged. The $280,000 had not gone toward hospital bills. Large sums had been wired to cover markers at regional casinos. Other transfers pointed to speculative investment accounts, high-risk ventures with volatile returns. The total debt exposure was higher than I had ever imagined. My father hadn't simply feared the cost of my surgery. He had feared the collapse of an entire hidden structure of debt he had been balancing for years. The DNR was not just about avoiding medical expense. It was about preventing everything else from being exposed. Late Tuesday night at 10:43 p.m., my phone lit up with his name again. I stepped onto June's balcony before answering. "You've destroyed my life," he said. His voice sounded different now, not theatrical, not composed, hollow. "I didn't destroy anything," I replied. "I stopped protecting it. You went to the police, you froze the bank. You stood up in front of everyone. You signed a DNR at 11:18 p.m., I said evenly. You said, 'Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery.'" He inhaled sharply. "You don't understand the pressure I was under." "I understand the timestamp," I answered. There was a long pause. "You're my daughter," he said finally, as if that fact alone should override everything. "And I'm alive," I replied. Silence stretched between us. Then the line disconnected. On Wednesday afternoon, Blaine called again. This time she didn't start with accusations. "I lost 2 listings," she said quietly. "Both church members. They said they need time before working with the family." I didn't respond immediately. "I'm not being charged," she continued. "I didn't sign anything. But people remember." "Yes," I said. "They do." There was a shift in her tone I hadn't heard before. "Grandma wrote me a letter," she said. "I didn't tell you that." "What did it say?" "She told me she loved me, but she wrote that I was too much like Dad, that I needed to choose differently." I leaned back against the balcony railing. "Did you?" I asked. She didn't answer. "I'm not asking you to fix anything," she said. "I just needed you to know I see it now." "Seeing it is the first step," I said, "but it's not the same as changing." "I know." We ended the call without drama. By Thursday, the prosecutor's office had reviewed the case file. Elliot called me late that afternoon. "They're offering a reduced charge if your father accepts responsibility," he said. "Forgery in the 3rd-degree fraud-related offenses. Probation instead of extended incarceration contingent on restitution and cooperation. And if he refuses, the evidence is substantial. The notarization irregularities, the signature analysis, Dane's testimony." I exhaled slowly. "He'll take it," I said. "He has little choice." By the end of the week, my father agreed to the plea arrangement. He would repay as much as possible. He would submit to financial oversight. He would avoid prison time only if he complied fully. He was formally asked to step down from his role as deacon. Several longtime clients terminated contracts. The house he had lived in for nearly 2 decades was listed for sale. On Friday night, I sat alone in June's living room, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not triumph, relief. What frightened me most was not that my father was unraveling. It was that I no longer felt indebted to him. 1 month later, the court issued its ruling. The transfer of the Ardsley Park property was declared void. The power of attorney was deemed fraudulent. Title was restored fully and officially to my name. The bank rescinded the mortgage lien because the individual who signed the loan agreement did not legally own the property at the time of execution. Any funds already disbursed became my father's personal liability. Shortly after the insurance company concluded its review, the beneficiary change filed 3 years earlier was invalid. The signature had been forged. The case was referred to investigators for supplemental review. That was the final piece. For a long time, some part of me had clung to the possibility of misunderstanding, that maybe he had panicked, that maybe stress had distorted his judgment. But the insurance form erased that last illusion. He had prepared for every scenario. If I lived, he avoided the cost of surgery and secured the house. If I died, he received the insurance payout. There was no version of events in which my well-being was prioritized, only outcomes in which his exposure was minimized. After selling his house, he moved in with his older brother in a neighboring city. Blaine kept her real estate license, but the social ease she once moved through had shifted. Invitations came less often. Conversations were shorter. Our family image had fractured, and I no longer stood behind it to hold it together. I returned to Coastal Savannah Medical Center part-time at first. Roxanne handed me a revised schedule without ceremony. "Welcome back," she said. No speeches, no dramatics, just acknowledgement. Each time I walked past the ICU room where I had once lain unconscious, I felt a steady reminder. I wasn't alive because of divine intervention alone. I was alive because someone read the file carefully. Late October brought cooler air. One Saturday afternoon, I drove to Ardsley Park. The house looked the same as it always had. Brick exterior, porch swing shifting gently in the breeze. I unlocked the front door with my own key. The scent of dried herbs lingered faintly in the drawers. My grandmother's careful touches still present in small details, lavender sachets tucked into corners, recipe cards stacked neatly in the kitchen. I sat in her old rocking chair by the window. Sunlight filtered across the hardwood floor. I didn't feel like I had defeated anyone. I felt like I had stepped into something prepared for me long ago. I thought back over the sequence. The DNR at 11:18 p.m., the forged power of attorney, the mortgage, the insurance form, the church hall, the courtroom. I had not destroyed my father. I had stopped carrying his weight. Hatred would have meant he still controlled my emotions. He didn't. I set a boundary and kept it. For years, I believed being a good daughter meant absorbing whatever was handed to me. Every accusation, every reminder of what I supposedly cost. Now I understand something different. Being a good daughter to myself means protecting my life, my property, and my truth. The house in Ardsley Park stands as proof. I am not a debt. I am not a burden. I am not a line item on a bill. I am a survivor. And I decide what happens next. When a story like this ends, what lingers isn't the courtroom, the paperwork, or even the collapse of a reputation. What stays with us is something quieter. The moment a person decides they are no longer willing to carry a weight that was never truly theirs. Sometimes the bravest thing we do isn't fighting back. It's stepping out from under silence. And in that space, we don't just reclaim property or dignity, we reclaim ourselves. Maybe that's what this journey leaves us with. We can love our families and still draw a line. We can feel compassion and still choose self-respect. Those two things are not enemies. They can sit in the same room if we let them. Life has a way of forcing hard reckonings, but it also gives us the chance to grow into steadier, kinder versions of ourselves. If this story resonated with you in any way, and you'd like to be part of a space where we listen without judgment, consider subscribing. And if you feel comfortable, you can leave a few lines in the comments about a boundary that changed your life. We read them carefully. Thank you for being here with us. Until next time, take care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.